Hello, everyone. This is the second of a series of interviews with Miki as a response to the coronavirus, and also in a parallel flow with her blog post series, again, as a response to the coronavirus and our responses to it. And the title of the second article is Apart and Together, Addressing Needs Beyond Market Economies. I would like to start with the first question. Miki, in your article, you mention the difference between a market economy, which is based on exchange, and a gift economy, which is based on unilateral, unconditional giving and receiving. And every time I hear about gift economy and its oneness with our social and biological nature, this really touches me so deeply. And despite my strong interest and belief in it, it's still so hard to fully grasp it for me and also for those whom I share this perspective with. Because we are born into a totally different way of attending needs, market economy, conditional giving and receiving. And these days, market economy is disabled by the corona crisis. So it's not capable of attending to needs now, but the needs are still being attended. And how? The resources are mobilized by states, local governments, communities, individuals. So this is so much closer to the gift economy. It's visible, it's easier to recognize it now. So I want to take this opportunity to hear more from you about it in this time. And how do you see the significance of both the gift economy and this new way of giving and receiving, which we are experiencing now?
First of all, I want to say it's not because it's a crisis that the market economy is not able to attend to needs. The market economy is not designed to attend to needs. It's designed to have resources exchanged based on effective demand. That's the technical term. It's not based on need. If you have a need and you don't have resources to back up your need, then your need means nothing in the market economy. And so my way of looking at it now is that the market economy has slowed down and the overall level of need has increased. So the gap is even more visible in terms of what the market economy is or isn't capable of doing. There's less capacity to generate resources to attend to whatever needs do have effective demand, and many more people lost their capacity to have effective demand. That's what it means that people are vulnerable. What does it mean, vulnerable communities? These are communities that have needs without resources to care for those needs. You know, it's not like the quote unquote vulnerable communities have more needs. It's that they have needs without resources to back them up. So, you know, in the world that, in the framework that I hold, we all have the same needs. It's just that some of us have the power to claim, to make claims against the general pool of resources, and some of us don't. That's part of what money does. Is money is a claim against the world's resources. That's really what it gives you. It's like, here, see, I have money, give me my needs. Whereas if you don't, what are you going to do? So this is exposed. It explodes within a market economy in crisis, and it makes it more apparent that the market cannot actually attend to the needs. And then I'm curious if that is making sense to you, if you have any follow-up to this.
No, it is definitely answering, and also it's bringing this piece into it as well. You know, in your article you were saying in all times, you know, the need itself was enough to generate the movement for attending to those needs.
It is, even now. Just think about situation like, you walk down the street and you're not particularly crowded in time or whatever. You're just walking down the street and you see someone with some need. Don't you feel moved to want to help? It's so simple, and we so don't see just how simple it is. We think it's complicated, but it isn't. You said in your question, we're born in a world, into a world of a market economy. We actually aren't. We're born into a world of a gift economy. As an infant, the first thing that we experience is the gift economy. It is only later that we move out of the gift economy into the exchange economy that sits on top of the gift economy and extracts from it. So it's not like the gift economy is gone, it's that it's submerged. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And who wants to go next? Kyoko, would you like to go next?
I know it's really tied into what you're asking and what we are talking about, but at the same time, it's something to do with, well, that brought up the different question: how are we equipped to differentiate needs and wants? That's another thing that came up as I was listening the conversation. But my original question was, how do we actually imagine the things that we've never experienced? Probably as a baby, but not quite. And with that, all of us have so much drama, collective drama, generational trauma, and personal trauma, that layers of it.
Yeah. So I want to address everything, and it's a lot that you asked. So if I forget any piece, then please remind me. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I want to say is that when we are born, actually I would say even before we're born, when we are in utero, there's no difference between need and want, need and strategy. There's only one way to attend to our needs when we are in utero. And that way is what biology created. Now, modern science is eating away at this from both ends. You can now begin to have babies in a test tube, and you can end a pregnancy in an incubator. So the period of time in which it is absolutely irreplaceable for just one strategy is shorter, but it still exists, it's irreducible. If we don't have a uterus in which we can be with a female body that can give us the nutrients, we will not make it into the world. When we come out into the world, there is a little beginning of separation between the need and the strategy, but it's very small. Biologically, we are attached to one human body that is going to generate the milk, that is going to generate the support for the needs. That is given unilaterally. There's no exchange going on there. There isn't going to be a mother that says to the baby, wait a minute, I'm going to give you milk if you're going to give me this or that. It doesn't happen like this. It may be that because we live in a market economy and exchange is so built into us, that there's resentment built over time. And maybe 5 years later, the mother will say to the child, hey, I gave you all of this, now you give me that. But that's after the fact. In the moment of giving, it flows. In the moment of giving, it flows without any particular expectation. In the moment of receiving, as an infant, I receive. I don't have anything in me that says I owe. All these are concepts that come later. So, however, when our needs generally are not met, which is the case in life now. I mean, it's starting to change a little bit, but just think about the situation of a baby that knows that it needs to be in constant touch with another human body. Doesn't have to be the same human body, but it needs to be in constant touch with a human body, suddenly being put in a separate room, in a cage, without anyone there. What are you going to do? You're going to cry. You're going to be desperate. You're going to feel your helplessness. See, helplessness and dependence are not the same. We associate them as if it's the same thing, but it isn't. Dependence is an observational thing. That is just how it is. But helplessness only happens when the people you depend on are not giving you what you need, and there's nothing else you can do because you are dependent. There isn't helplessness inherent in it. Helplessness is relational. If our needs are not met, we don't integrate that feeling of satisfaction. And then from then on, every strategy looks like a need. So we don't know how to differentiate between needs and wants because our needs are so sorely unmet that the intensity of it attaches to everything. So if we actually, it then takes a practice to be able to know, do I need this? What is the real need underlying this? And is there more than one way to attend to this need? It's a practice of liberation. But that's separate from the practice of giving and receiving, which is at the baseline of gifts. Now I want to go to the piece that you asked about, how can we envision things that we have nothing in our experience. First of all, it's not true that we have nothing. We are trained not to look certain ways. But if you start looking, just go through, review one day of your life and look for all the gifts that were given to you. Just look for the unilateral gifting that accompanies every day of your life. I mean, it's like you go to the post office, let's say, which obviously now you don't, but just you go to the post office, you give the package to the clerk weighs it, puts a stamp on it, and takes it. All that is part of the exchange. But if the post office clerk smiles at you and says something kind, that's a gift. That's not an exchange. It's not part of the transaction. It's the world of gifting leaking through the cover of the exchange. Does that make sense? So that's one way to remember. One way to remember is to notice. Also, every time you give to someone unilaterally, notice it. Notice the joy. It's such clean joy. Do you know what I'm talking about, Kyoko? That it's pure joy because it has no strings attached. You're not trying to get something out of it. It's just like, oops. It's just clean flow of energy. You know, when I came to the United States, I came from a society that when I was a child was not deeply capitalistic. It is now, but it wasn't when I was raised. It was a strange mix of first world, second world, and third world. That was Israel of the 50s and the 60s. Now it's squarely within the hyper-capitalist world, but it's a different time. And I remember being struck by how difficult it was for the people in the US to be generous. And I wasn't judging them. I was feeling sorry for them. I was feeling sorry because generosity is a source of pleasure. And I'm looking at you, Kyoko. You come from a Japanese culture, which has its own many problems. I'm not idealizing any particular culture, but it's a very group-oriented, giving-oriented culture. I was in Japan and I have Japanese friends, so what I know is it's like you are looking to see where the hole is and where the needs are, and you orient in that way. It's hard to see your own needs, but it's very easy to see need and to move in that direction. Am I capturing something familiar to you?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
That's gifting. Sure, there is conformity and pressure on top of it, but it wouldn't happen if there wasn't underneath it the capacity to give. I'm looking at Reena, who is in India, which is a culture where, where flow of giving and receiving is much more present than just about anywhere else that I've been, and I've been all around the world. So there isn't, talking about human nature, anybody who wants to talk about human nature, I invite them to travel around the world, and you will see there's human natures, not one. It is based on how we construct our societies. And if we construct them on exchange, people will emerge constricted, fearful, anxious, unable to give because they will be afraid that there won't be enough for them. Yeah. Did I answer your question, Kyoko?
Yeah, partly yes, and I know this is a huge question, and I was also wondering the traumas that the people are carrying.
Yeah. So, in my work, I talk a lot about patriarchy. And overall, it has been really important to me. It was like decades of persistent investigation, because the prevalent theories are that patriarchy is there because that's just how it is. It can't not be. And for me, it was like, no, it can't be that. If it was that, then we wouldn't be suffering from it. If it was human nature, why would we suffer? And so I started being on a quest to understand, if it isn't just given, then why are we living in patriarchal societies? And as far as I can tell, patriarchy is a response to trauma, to collective trauma. Collective, immediate, intense trauma. There are many different forms, and I'm not an expert in the field. But I from the little that I know and have read, there's either intrinsic trauma, like climate type trauma or earthquake or whatnot, physical trauma, or the trauma of invasion. Most of the patriarchy in the world is from invasion. The only intense turns to patriarchy have happened in a few places, not everywhere. The rest of it is through invasion and conquest, which are inherent in patriarchy, because patriarchy, once you're trying, so what does the collective trauma do? The collective trauma leads to loss of trust in life. Because if life is the constant flow of resources, caring for needs, all the time, moving around as best that the flow succeeds, humans trusted that for a long time. But when you no longer trust that, you're going to try to control it. And when you try to control it, you lose the inherent biological efficiency of ecosystems. When you lose it, you overuse resources too quickly, and then you need new territory. What are you going to do to get new territory? You're going to go to war. So war comes from it in an inevitable way, from the attempt to control, from overuse of resources, from needing to siphon resources towards the few who are in power. That creates scarcity, and that means, okay, now we need to go acquire new territory. So all this creates collective trauma that then gets passed on from generation to generation. And under conditions of trauma, it means that we fundamentally get to, as soon as we emerge from infancy, we begin to grow our mistrust. And when we grow our mistrust, it's harder to be in the flow of giving and receiving. So to restore that flow, it sometimes actually takes us going against our spontaneous way of being. And there's a lot there that I would like to leave room for other questions as well, but if you have like an immediate follow-up, I'll be happy to take it.
No, thank you. There's a lot to digest, and what you were talking about is more systematic level, but I can kind of mirror it that's happening in the very personal level.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is trying to understand the difference more between gift economies and exchange economies. And from what I understand so far, in a gift economy, a need exists, and so a gift is given. And then the important part is that a relationship is formed. And what I've read a little bit about is that then sometimes there's just a sort of a natural feeling of wanting to give back to the person who's given to you. But I guess I'm just not quite, that feels almost like exchange to me, so I'm not sure how to understand the difference between those two.
Yeah. So, so a desire to give back is, in my mind, is already kind of like cluttered a little bit by the exchange. Because if you think about it in the abstract, there can be a desire to give that is fulfilled by the other person receiving it. And that completes a circle. And you're in relationship. And then in a different moment, maybe 2 minutes from now and maybe 2 years from now, I can give and you can receive. It doesn't have to be in exchange. It can be a flow. It's like a turn taking or a flow or something that is arising in the moment, not in relation to the previous one. That is this one of the subtle differences. It's also the experience of I owe you is unrelated to need. In other words, I may have a need, you give me something, and in the world of exchange, I now experience myself as owing you, and I will then feel like I must give you regardless of whether or not you have a need. This is an injury already. In the kind of like in the flow of turn taking, it's like I respond to a need in you, not to a concept within me.
Gotcha. Yes, thank you. I understand more. And I have just one other question, which is, do you think that if we went from an exchange market to a gift economy, that there would be many needs that weren't met because like if the need is put out there but no one is willing to fulfill it, then do you think there'd be like a spike in suffering almost?
So the degree of material suffering that exists in some parts of the world, in some populations, is so extreme that I would be hard-pressed to believe that if we stopped accumulating and started redirecting resources towards needs, that we would have more suffering. It's hard for me to envision how we could have more suffering than we have now, except through more and more accumulation. Because what happens is because we live on a finite planet, when I accumulate and move something towards me that I don't need and isn't going to be composted through my use into new something that will flow elsewhere, it just stays, it's congealed, it's energy that doesn't move, and it also means that there is less available overall in the system for circulation. So that means everybody else is going to have less to divide and distribute and circulate amongst them. So my accumulation creates scarcity. This is the thing that is really hard for many people to see, that there's a direct link between accumulation and scarcity. Now, I don't want to, kind of like skip over the reality that once you move from exchange to relationship, there is more immediate and apparent vulnerability. If I put my need on the table without the force of the money that I have, then I'm back to the dependence, the original dependence, which, because of the way that our societies are structured, feels inside of me like I am going to be helpless. It makes it really hard to put my needs out. It makes it really hard to relax into having unmet needs. And it also makes it really hard for anybody else to give to me, for fear that they will then have less. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The real question for me in terms of thinking about an evolutionary leap is gift economy on a small scale, either direct or through the commons, which is a mechanism of handling resources that everybody uses in parallel. Those work. We don't need to prove anything. It works. We know that. The question for me is whether we have the evolutionary capacity to scale. Because in order to scale, we need to expand our relationship capacity, our care capacity, not our giving capacity, but our capacity to see a larger circle of people, entities, etc., as something that we care about, so that if we have resources, we will give to needs of people we may not even know. This is helping me understand something that I didn't understand up until now, literally up until this second. It is known in the world of so-called development that if you are, let's say, fundraising for hunger in some unknown country, in some unknown continent, I'm not even going to go into where hunger is and why it's concentrated there. Let's leave that alone. That's not the point. If you give statistics about all the difficulties that happen in that country, etc., you will get X amount of dollars for fundraising for the hungry people of that country. If you give the statistics and you also tell the story of one girl that is starving, you will get more than X dollars. If you tell the story of the girl and don't give the statistics at all, you get the most dollars. That's well known in the fundraising world. And now I understand the reason, because we give on the basis of relationship. And when we hear the story of the girl, we can feel like we have a relationship with this one person and we're giving to this one person. Even if we're not, we feel it. So there's one of our global tasks is to find a way to give based on a relationship with everyone, a relationship with the whole. Yeah. Thank you.
Miki, I live in India, and we are many people here, and the physical distancing that is required in the times of coronavirus is almost impossible. And I want to also talk about my inspiration around, what Gandhiji said, that there is enough for our needs and not enough for our greed. When I see the situation, which is so much in the face right here in India, where now the migrant laborers are walking past my gate. They start walking at 12 or 2 in the night because it's not hot, because maybe nobody is there to shoo them away, or because the police are not there to, people are not there to ask questions. So now, I am wondering about ownership and being a trustee of what I own personally, and also the capacity that I have to earn in the future. So that's one part. And then I was reading your article where Jim Stockinger, you have quoted, where each of us lives in and through an immense movement of the hands of other people. I see it constantly. That's part of my daily life. In India, our daily reality is based on the chaos of our inherent interdependence, and this can overwhelm me, or it can stimulate me and impact me to resonate with diverse narratives. You just spoke about the story of a girl and how it impacts people. So the diverse narratives of many lives that coexist with mine makes me look at what I own as a trustee. And then your idea of putting needs at the center is quite doable. I naturally flow into that. Now my question is that how can I nurture the shifts that are stimulated multiple times each day by scenes of migrant laborers or realities of domestic workers whose lives have become irrelevant because of physical distancing? So basically, how do I nurture the shifts that are there through all these different multiple narratives around me? Yeah.
Thank you, Reena.
As a trustee of what I have. Yes.
Yeah, you are touching on very, very, very deep spiritual, political, material, economic questions all at once. There's just like so much in what you asked that, sometimes I think a good question is worth more than the answer to it. So I just want to honor your question, your lived experience. So first of all, I want to take Gandhi's words, there's enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. This fits completely with the indigenous wisdom from around the world that fuels my faith in natural abundance, which is that if everyone takes what they need, not more and not less, there will be enough to keep sustaining the system. And because we have lost our trust in life, we are prone to taking more than we need when we can. And that, like I said before, creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that then leaves less for others, and then it sets us up against each other. So we see those who have less than us as eyeing what we have, so then we have to protect it, and then it intensifies the class struggles and all of these things, and it creates an environment of mistrust and fear and desire for control. So when you take a step of saying, I am not the owner of my resources, I am a trustee, it completely changes the questions you're going to ask yourself. instead of asking yourself, what am I going to do to satisfy my needs tomorrow with the resources that I have? You're going to ask a question, given the fact that I am the trustee of what I have access to, but not of all the world's resources, only that which I have access to. How do I care for the whole in the most responsible, effective, efficient way? Where is the place to flow my resources to that is going to align most closely with my purpose, with my values, with the resources that I have, with my intuition, with all of these things? There's no escaping from it. Once you ask that question, it's like a door slams shut behind you, and you can no longer go back to the convenient world of private property. I own everything and I'm the master of whatever little money I have. You can no longer do that. I cannot answer your question. I just know that some of us ask it all the time. And when we ask it, we're going to get better and better and better at directing our resources well. That's one piece. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's liberating to really hear you that, you know, the door slams and behind you and you cannot go back. And that's where my definition of responsibility more and more is my ability to respond. I no longer feel the heaviness of that word, responsibility. Even if self-responsibility is not like, oh, I'm on my own and I have to survive. It's, I have the ability to respond and I have choices. And I see more of me in the other and more around me through the narratives that are right there.
Yes.
So it's interdependence on a daily basis.
Yes, and there is one more important piece, and then I would like to close and hear from other people, which is, this is the dilemma of individual solutions to systemic problems, which is the topic of one of the future pieces. You cannot individually fix the world's problems or change the system. Each one of us is going to continue to live in a world that is shaped by the exchange economy. And there's going to be only so much that we can exit that and move into a gift economy or into a relationship of relating to the commons. So I want us to remember and have humility about how far this can go. Not very far. It goes very far internally, but not very far to change the systems of the world. Thank you. Thank you, Rina.
Thank you.
I want to say something else. So success, because it's such an important part of market economy and the way that I've been trained to think. Maya Angelou brought in this beautiful, somebody quoted her and I'm bringing it in because I have it on my computer. And it says, success is not an external outcome. It is, the way I measure success is liking myself, liking what I do, and liking how I do it. And that measure of success has flow. So in the question that I have is, we are engaged in this practice of Oscar is taping the interview to bring this information more, making it more available. You write posts. We are engaged in NGL communities. Are you thinking that this is not enough to attend to the shift that we are sort of asking of ourselves and others? Is it not enough to attend to the collapse that's happening at the different levels that it is, both personally and societally?
Yeah. So I want to say a few things. First of all, when you talk about maximizing output, it's always for me a question of over what period of time? Because you could say that indigenous communities maximize output over an indefinite amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that colonizing cultures maximize output now in disregard of anything else. So it is layers and layers of separation and control and fear and mistrust that go into that. Managing a commons always has within it care for the whole and care over time. We manage it to be regenerative, not to be extracted. So the kinds of shifts that this entails are very, very profound. The communities that manage resources for the collective well-being of all the creatures, not just the humans, all the creatures, all the beings, all the forms of life that are there, operate within enoughness, not with maximizing. What is enough is a different question of what is more. Can we do more? Can we squeeze more out of it? And then if you squeeze more out of it, there's nothing left for tomorrow. So it's on the spiritual consciousness plane different. The societal orientation is different. So that's one piece. Then I want to attend to the last question that you asked. And I want to say, really the only honest thing that I can say is I don't know. What I mean by not knowing is there is no linear path from where we are to a world that works for all. We don't know that linear path. This is precisely why I'm seeing this current crisis as so generative, even though it's really difficult. Because it is disruptive enough of business as usual that it creates an opportunity. Whether we will collectively find a way to mobilize in a new way or not remains unknown. Is this the end of the crisis, the beginning of the crisis? We don't know. How much crisis is needed in order to wake us up? We don't know. So there is, it's not an idle not knowing. It's a profound not knowing. But what I do know is to everywhere that I am, anyone with whatever sphere of influence we have, if we orient in this way, we move even microscopically in the direction of vision. And if we figure out how to connect the dots, not create a critical mass, I don't mean that, I mean multiply and synergize our efforts, then maybe something will happen. And I don't know what it will look like. Thank you. All right, who's next?
I would like to ask something, Miki. I've noticed during this crisis that so many people living a very different lives to what they're accustomed to. Many people talking about how it could be different, or let's not go back to business as usual, but not many ideas out there about actually how it could be different. And I would really like to put in front of people some ideas about how it could be different. This will be on social media. This is where most of my engagement happens at the moment. And I think people tend to engage on social media with very short articles. I'd love it if everybody went out and read your essay, but I fear that not many will. I've posted a few times on Twitter and it gets some engagement, but not a lot. So I'd really like to come up with some, or to find some small, short, but really valuable insights that I could use that would get people a different theory of human nature, a different idea of economics, a different way of how resources are distributed. And I'm wondering if you can suggest any resources for that or any techniques.
This is one of my own pet peeves, that people want simple solutions to complex problems. I think that in itself is a symptom of where we are. The overwhelm that we live with, overwhelm of anxiety, overwhelm of information, overwhelm of complexity. We want simple answers. I don't think they exist, but there are simple practices. One of the simple practices is what Rina was already talking about. Take a look at your resources. Take an inventory of all your resources, and then very open-eyed look at what do you do with each of them. How are you using your resources? Is it aligned with who you want to be, with what you want to contribute, with how you want to show up in the world, with your purpose, with your values? Is it aligned or is it not? If it is, great, check, move on. If it isn't aligned, what steps are you going to take to align your use of resources with the purpose and values that you have for your life? That's a simple practice. I will just give that to you. I bet anything that if people started using this practice and did it seriously, and in little pockets and islands, things will change. Does that give you something?
It does, thank you. Yes, and that's something I can practice in lockdown.
Right.
Would
Lovely.
you say also, sorry to interrupt, but would you say also, Miki, that you would want people to make those decisions based off of their capacity and their willingness?
Yes, exactly. Because if you go beyond capacity, your organism will eventually react. So it's an ongoing dance to go within capacity as a way to build more capacity. Yeah. Where is exactly the line where the stretch is not going to overwhelm us, but it's going to get us moving somewhere? Because if we stay completely within comfort zone, nothing changes also. It's a delicate balance. Yeah.
Yeah, may I say it's about how we manage our overwhelm. Like Marcella mentioned pain, and pain is also about gratitude. Through that pain, one learns about gratitude, and how we manage our overwhelm keeps us open to new possibilities rather than shut down or numb ourselves.
Yes, and this is as good a moment as any to say no change will be sustainable without support. If we're going to create change, we need to have support. Support structures are super important for any change we're trying to create, whether individual or collective. And Sinovio, I think I haven't heard any question from you.
Thank you. Yeah, what's on my mind is thinking about how the crisis has shown aspects of the food system being vulnerable or breaking down relative to getting crops to where they're needed, or with meat production basically breaking down as well. And I'm just, what's on my mind is thinking about how do we manage the food system as a commons, and what are ways in which we can try to practice commons type behaviors, maybe at a small scale, and have perhaps creativity and suggestions for these large scale problems.
I love the question. First of all, I think it's important to say that commons-based and needs-based economies are subsistence economies. And one of the things that we learn in a capitalist market-based modern socialization is to look down on subsistence economies as primitive, stupid, etc. And all the wisdom that exists in subsistence economies is erased from that way of looking at things. Because what is a subsistence economy? You create economic activity just enough to attend to needs. In subsistence economies, people tend to have more time. They tend to have more relationship focus. They tend to have more capacity to engage and be in relationship with life beyond just the human. So there are many things, there are many benefits to the subsistence economy that we have been trained not to see. Our economy is consumption-based, and in a consumption-based rather than subsistence-based, you are always going to look for more ways to consume as an individual. And why do you do that? Because that's the only way that keeps the engine going of the economy. See, part of the kind of like the selling our soul to the devil is there are basic things about economics that people don't know, which is that why does the economy have to grow all the time? There's a reason. It's not just because somebody wants it to grow. It's because the economy is driven by debt, and debt has interest. And in order to pay the interest, if you add up everybody's debt and everybody's interest, where is that going to come from? Individually, it's easy. It's like, okay, I work a little more, or I sell a product on the side or something. But if you add it up cumulatively, it means having to grow the economy faster than the interest rate grows. That is where the growth imperative comes from. So you, by definition, have to produce more collectively, whether or not it's needed. So the transitions, again, this is another angle. It's like this, all the conversations that we're having here today, all the different questions go to profoundly deep topics that where our eyes have been veiled, basically. So let's now go to your question of food. The difficulty is that the overwhelming majority of people on the planet don't have direct access to food. The only access we have to food is through supply chains. It's very different from having access to food that is local, that is in your garden or in your community, in your neighborhood, in the field that is around the corner. Those are things the majority of people on the planet no longer know. There's still, I think about a third of the world's population still depends on commons for its daily living. That's a lot. Maybe it's less than a third now. I don't know. I haven't kept up with the numbers, but it's substantial numbers of people are still living in direct relationship with the commons. But those of us who don't are in a situation of such precarity that is hidden from us. We are like a few days away from mass starvation, basically. Because if the whole logistical machinery that moves commodities around the globe were to collapse, everybody who lives in cities will be in deep trouble very quickly. So the question of how do you move away from that? How, again, I can only speak of islands, not at scale. On the islands, community gardens are a step in that direction. So I don't know what the numbers are now, but a few years ago, I learned that in Havana, in the maligned country of Cuba, 50% of the food that people in Havana eat grows within Havana. A city grows within the city. Now that tells you something, and that's doable. That's doable. Another thing that you can do is you can create urban-rural relationships, because most of the food in the US that is grown travels about 1,500 miles or more than 2,000 kilometers before it reaches the table where it's going to be eaten. Sometimes it will go all this distance and then come back to something that is just 50 kilometers away, because that is the way that the supply chain is organized and there's no direct link. So farmers markets, they are not commons, but they tend in that direction. They start moving, because when you go to a farmer's market, you build a relationship with the vendor. You're no longer in pure exchange. You see the vendor, you see the farmer there, and you want them to thrive. So you're giving the money to the farmer with pleasure in a very different way than you're giving the money to a cashier in the supermarket, because there is already the rebuilding of a relationship in a farmer's market. So it's about rebuilding relationships, localizing, and reducing consumption. Those are like three key factors that I think can help. And I'm wondering if that speaks to your question at all.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I was also curious about other ways we could generate some creativity around the bigger system changes, but perhaps we don't know, or that can wait.
I have a picture of something that could be done. And that is in some fantasy piece that I have. The simple version of it is, I think many people know about bioregions, but there's something called ecoregions, which is a concept that measures both biological activity and human activity in different regions. And you can create ecoregions that have that are kind of like, it's fairly vague, but it's within the region. There's more similarity within the region than the similarity of each region to another. And the lines are completely based on biology and social relations. So that if I was like given the magic wand, this is what I would do. First, step one, complete the mapping of ecoregions in the globe. Right now, ecoregions are mapped only in North America. Map the entire world into ecoregions. Then within each ecoregion, get teams of volunteers to take inventory of the resources that exist within that region and the needs that exist within that region. And then you try to, first of all, match as many of the resources that are within the region to the needs that are within the region, so that the needs are met as locally as possible. And then after you do that, you get two pieces of data. One is, what are the needs that cannot be attended to at present with the resources that are available within the ecoregion? And the other is, what are the regions, the resources that exist within the region that are not needed and can be given to other regions? And then you can use the entire machinery of the logistical infrastructure and transportation infrastructure that exists at shorter distances, except you won't use money as the mediator, but just direct need and direct clarity about resources. So then the resources start flowing regionally, from region to region, based on need. And if you expand it, you can get to the entire globe being mapped, and it's known exactly where resources are and where needs are and what needs to move where for real, not based on some concept of greed. Yeah. Thank you. I think we're done.
Yes, we're done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miki, and each one of you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.